Forget pit stops, forget fuel management. It's pedal to the metal all the way here as we get ready for today's sprint. It's one of the shortest laps on the calendar today then, with 7 rights and just 3 lefts, making up the 10 corners of this high-speed circuit. Turn 2 is barely a corner at all. They'll be flat out through there, a left-hand kink into the uphill braking zone of Turn 3. Turns 1, 3 and 4 are all potential opportunities to overtake. Off the back of a fantastic qualifying session, it's time to see how our starting grid looks for today's sprint. Max Verstappen put in a fantastic lap yesterday, and he'll start from pole position. And Lando Norris lines up alongside. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Perez, Oscar Piastri, Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Russell, Tsunoda, Albon, Magnussen, Gasly, Hulkenberg, Joe, Stroll, Ocon, Fernando Alonso, Théo Pourchaire, Ricciardo and Logan Sargent. Which of these drivers will get pole position today? We'll soon find out. And alongside me in the commentary box, my old friend, Anthony Davidson. Well, they say that a change is as good as a rest, and whilst there's not much rest on show in the sprint format today, there's definitely a change to what we're usually seeing on the track. And let's talk momentum with this driver. What a sprint it was. They start at 0 once again for today, but with a huge amount of confidence, surely. Let's look at their season, and particularly against their teammate. Fair to say they've got the better of them more often than not. Well, they'll definitely be glad that there's not a sprint race today. Let's face it, the sprint couldn't have gone much worse, but what we're looking for today is a reaction. I know what we've got to do before the start of today's race, but what about our driver? What do the final hours look like for them?
Well, for them, you've got your pre-race rituals that you go through. You see different drivers that, some have got their headphones on, they're listening to the music. Some drivers really absorb the energy from the crowd and they're there waving to them. Other drivers, they go within themselves. They chat to their engineers, absorbing that information, that vital information that you need to carry you through the race. And, those pre-race rituals are essential to making things systematic. We do a lot of Grand Prix in a season, and the more systematic you can be, the easier you are within that environment.
Here we go then. The formation lap is underway ahead of today's sprint. As all the cars take their positions on the grid, the final preparations have been made, and all that's left is for the drivers to deliver on track.
Okay, we're monitoring somewhere on the internal combustion engine. Be aware that we're going to start to see a loss of power. DRS is being enabled this lap. We can use DRS when you're within 1 second of the car ahead and in the DRS zone. We're in P4. It's Perez ahead of you. They're on fresh mediums. Verstappen behind you now. Less than a second separates you. They're on fresh mediums. Okay, so gap to the leader, 1.8 seconds. Pit strategy complete. See these tyres through to the end now. Okay, 22 laps left. Look out for a bit of understeer when trailing the car ahead. They're going to be giving off dirty air, which is going to affect our tyres, so try to get past. Drivers just completed a pass for the lead of the race. great manoeuvre. You made it look so easy. Right, we need to get past here. Use overtake, use overtake. Gap to your teammate behind, 4.2 seconds. You're in second place. Lando ahead. They're on fresh mediums. And Verstappen's behind. They're on fresh mediums. That was our last stop. No more scheduled pit stops. Let's go. 13 laps to go. is sat in P2. Lando's ahead of you now. They're on old mediums. That's Yuki behind you. They're on old mediums. Look after these tyres now. We want to finish the race on this compound. And 11 laps to go. Pace is strong, but be aware these tyres need to go the distance. Caution. Okay, be aware there's an incident in the next part of the track. No overtaking through the yellow flags. Okay, clear. Nice move, good job. Tyre condition still looking good. Okay, so we're leading our teammate by 7.0 seconds. Okay, be aware, the grip levels are going to start falling away soon. That's P1. Norris is behind you. Okay, the gap is less than a second. They're on old mediums. That was our last stop. No more scheduled pit stops. Let's go. 2 laps left. Next time by will be your final lap. Final lap. Final lap. Push, push.
Checkered Flag.
Yes, come on! Oh my God!
Well, that's an end to the sprint action. Next up, we'll set the grid for the Grand Prix. So we'll see you next time.